Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Premier League panel show. Mind you, we don't need a big table. We can get away with like a bistro set this week.
Romantic dinner for two.
With like a coffee table in the middle is good enough. But I'm your host as always over here. I don't know, maybe the title is decided so everybody took off, but a lot of scheduling conflicts and stuff like that. But we have the only Brentford fan in the US over here. Glenn, what's happening, man?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Brentford to get to play. So yeah, we'll be talking about the other teams. But yeah, Europe's still possible for us, which is exciting, which I'm sure we'll get onto later today.
Yeah, I mean, quite a few stuff to talk about, even though a lot is decided. I kind of want to pick your brain on some things that, we might. I mean, the thing I like about this show is, yeah, they must be at the parade. They're getting ready. Yeah, they're just watching.
Yeah,
But
true.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because obviously, like the biggest thing right now is this over here, number 20 is in the books. Even Gary Neville kind of like alluded to it and gave it up, but Glenn, easy to say now that Liverpool is the most successful club in English football.
Yeah, I guess so. Congratulations to you guys. It's a fun season for me to join the channel, right? You've been in pretty good spirits for most of it. Yeah, I know. Well, I tell you what, you had that pretty sorry week where, I think FA Cup happened, but obviously the Champions League was a disappointment for you guys. And obviously we talked then. So it's interesting to see the kind of rise and fall of emotions for the Liverpool fans there on this channel. But, generally speaking, huge congrats to you. We were just talking before we went live about it being quite a likable bunch of players. I would agree with that. It seems like a very humble manager who I was listening to a podcast yesterday. See, the research, obviously you guys will know more than anyone else, the research that the club put into finding a replacement that kind of fit the tactics, the ethos, the players, like the depth in which I've just read and heard that they went into finding him, and for it to be a mutual match was exceptional. So you're a club that's, is run well, not perfectly, but well enough to win the title. Credit, to your fans for always being good. I always like the ethos of Liverpool. It's a working class game, it's a working class sport, and you can still see that in Liverpool. Yeah. Despite ticket inflation and all these other awful things. And you can talk about various costs that are kind of pushed onto fans these days. But nonetheless, Liverpool is a club I always like to see do well. I'd certainly prefer you to win the league than Arsenal, City, Chelsea, you name it. I mean, I was going to say Man United, but I had to look all the way down the table to 14th to find them. So yeah, huge credit to you guys. You've played, it's been interesting, right? You haven't played this kind of X Factor style football that necessarily we got used to under Klopp.
Yep.
Haven't been the Rolls Royce of Guardiola, which honestly I find a bit dull, to be honest. So I'm not in any way asking for that. But what you've done is got the best out of your squad, right? It was incredible for a manager to come in, work with a preset team, basically, right? It's not like being an international manager. You come in, you work with what you've got. Yep. And for him to motivate this bunch, for them to complement each other so well, it's been great. And you look at players like Van Dijk, Salah, Szoboszlai, McAllister. These are players who have they've got high ceilings, right? They've got high standards, but to watch them continually hit them through a season. Alisson, best goalkeeper in the Premier League. You have the best number 2 in the Premier League. Kelleher could play for most teams. I would say he would start for 15 teams in the Premier League, I would say. Right? I can't think of many who he wouldn't start for.
This is a huge argument we get into. There's a lot of people. I put him in middle level. I think he could be a goalie for like a team like Bournemouth and stuff like that, West Ham and stuff. I don't know. But going back to, when I was watching some of the season highlights and stuff, we kind of forget that he was in goal, everybody talks about like Arsenal injuries and stuff like that, but Ali was out for almost 2 months and played with our backup goalie, and he played excellence. Bar that, the error he made in the Newcastle game in the last second is the only one that comes to mind. Yeah. I think when you're a Liverpool fan and you're kind of spoiled with having arguably the best goalie in the world, leave alone like the Premier League, right? There's Courtois and stuff. There's a couple of guys to compare to, but whoever you put in goal is in a bad situation because he's going to be compared to the very best.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I think, natural for Liverpool fans to when we see a goal go in, we're like, would Ali save that? It's got kind of like a natural
Of course.
But we forget that he was in there for 2 months and did extremely well. Where even though we do say, "Oh, would Ali save that?" We never said, "We're not going to get very far until Ali gets back or whatever." And that's a huge statement for anybody backing up a guy like Ali.
Absolutely. No, yeah, as we said, you look at the table, the majority, unequivocally, the majority of teams, so more than 10 in the league, would take him as their number one, without a doubt. So you've got that depth. You've had players stepping up where they've needed. You've played a really, I think, smart brand of football. I think it's been pragmatic without being boring. You've still delivered. I mean, obviously, the party on Sunday says it all, but you've still got quality across the pitch. You know, players like Diaz, Gakpo, you know, they're all really exciting, right? They're players that I like watching. Yep. And you've run away with it. When all's said and done, you've won the league in April. What a huge story, huge success. You can say that's partially you guys doing well, partially rivals collapsing. Bit of both when all's said and done. You know, I think even if you had a team that was meeting your standards week in, week out, who's to say you wouldn't still win the league, right? It's not about the opposition. It's about what you guys do every week. So I'm looking at the table.
I feel like we haven't had anybody. I think this team perhaps could have, I mean, it's weird to say that, but I mean, you look at like the records and, you know, I mean, they've only lost 2 games, drawn 7. It's like weird to say that, but I really do feel that if there was somebody chasing this team and pushing this team, they possibly could have done better. Like that era where they were kind of going backward with City, like both of them were winning every week and stuff like that. We just didn't have anybody to really like push us further. Like that Fulham game comes to mind. Good thing Alex isn't here, but you know, like where I feel like that game would not go down like that if Liverpool is being chased and they really need 3 points from that. There were a lot of games we just went out there and be like, see how it goes, kind of a deal.
Yeah, you weren't pushed into hitting that 5th gear week in, week out because you know, there wasn't that team breathing down your shoulder. And as soon as Arsenal fell away, it was clear that City, Chelsea, other teams were nowhere near. And really, it's the Premier League this season has been a story of you guys winning it, of the bottom 3 teams being the worst in my memory, I think, worst bottom 3 teams.
Yeah.
And the only excitement really has been this race for Europe, which is, you know, it's exciting to some extent. I guess if you're like a Villa fan or a Forest fan, like that's really cool for you. Obviously, Villa have shown what they can do in Europe this season. But, you know, nonetheless, for you guys to be clear winners by nearly, I mean, the best part of 20 points, the best part of it, you know, by April, it's a pretty sorry indictment of at least how poorly the other teams have done. And that doesn't take away from your success at all. We're not saying it's one or the other, but you can celebrate Liverpool's brilliant success, which I think it actually maybe lowered their ceiling slightly because, as you said, they didn't have that team just pushing them to be better than every single week. But that's fine. I mean, you've still won 25 games. You've lost twice this season. That's huge. I mean, Newcastle in 3rd have lost 10. You know, Man City have lost 9. Yeah. You know, this is, and I appreciate Arsenal, to be fair, have only lost 3 times, but they've drawn 13 and you guys have drawn 7. So that's the story of the season, isn't it? It's Arsenal draw too many games and you guys are clinical. So credit to you. I was really excited, you know, for you that you won it. Happy to see you do well. And I mean, and for the fact that, you know, the manager got the best, like Gravenberch, right, has been superb this season. Slight kind of rejig of where he's playing. For him to do that so often, even as some players like Robertson haven't hit, like he's had a pretty kind of inconsistent season, but to get good games from Konate week in, week out. As I said, the midfield's been a powerhouse this season. And, you know, you've had a few injuries to deal with as well. It's always frustrating when other clubs complain about injuries and this and that, and Odegaard and Saka or whoever else, or Rodri and Haaland. It's like, you know, you guys have budgets that dwarf the majority of the league. You've got to be smarter with your recruitment. And having no Rodri, you can't really say equivalent because he is a Ballon d'Or winner and he is a world-class player. And I don't doubt his impact on the team because we've seen it this season.
Yeah.
But you can still blame bad planning, right? You know, you can't have the entire season resting on him.
Case, you can definitely plan. I think like City, it was more like a bad off season more than anything else. Like you let Alvarez go without really like a plan B and stuff like that. And I think, you know, you can tell by what they did in January that they knew they missed the boat in the summer. And I think it probably the Chargers have a lot to do with that. But a guy like Marmoush, for example, probably should have come in the summer if Alvarez is going the other way. But give a shout out to Joel Wilson over here, all the way from Honduras. Welcome aboard, sir. Thanks for joining us. And I got to give a shout out to Ryan, of course. want to give a lot of credit to the Spurs fans that stuck around to clap for Liverpool. To be fair, Ryan, this is a rare occasion for a Spurs fan to see a team winning something, so they probably want to see like how it pans out.
That's cruel. That's cruel. He said that in good faith as well. That's cruel.
Good thing Jake is in here. Abdul Rahim, how's it going, man?
Hey, Abdul.
I was going to ask you this because you're as a neutral fan. I mean, you're a Brentford fan, so you're looking from outside in. You know, we were, like I say, just watching that inside Anfield, and you see the players, their interactions. What I love about this team is, and this has been the case, I would say, something has started with Klopp, and I think he has eliminated a couple of guys along the way who did not fit this, but it is a very likable bunch. They look like a good set of human beings.
Oh, yeah.
And I know we're biased as Liverpool fans because you get connected to your people. But in the past, I mean, I always, talk about Suarez, for example, great player, great goals and his contributions and stuff like that. But not a dude I like as a human being. As a cannibal, maybe you might like him because he goes around biting people, but not as like, I mean, I just don't. And, it is what it is. But there are times where you might not like a player. Like there are players, right? Like if you love them if they're on your team.
Oh yeah.
You hate them if they're away. And that's totally different. Like I'm sure like there are fans who don't like Robertson and stuff like that. There are guys like that, instigators and stuff. But taking even that aside, I feel like overall this team is just full of like really like good humans where you're like, you feel for them when they do bad and you really like seeing them like succeed and stuff like that. How do you see that? Cersei says, would I go for a bite to eat with Stride? No, not without protection of some sort. But how do you see it from outside, Glenn? Like, how do you view like this team? Like, we kind of talked about right before it went on air, like Arsenal. I feel like there are teams where God, they're like so hard to like, and I know rivalry is part of it. But as a more of a neutral looking outside, how do you view like some of these bigger clubs and their squads?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, yeah, Liverpool seems like a particularly likable bunch. I mean, you saw the celebrations; they feel like real humans, right? I think that's a huge part of this team. I mean, we all have these kind of parasocial relationships, right, with sports people these days, with Instagram, Twitter, whatever else, but this Liverpool team feels like, if I was to get a beer or a soft drink and just talk football with a squad, with an elite squad, I feel like they'd be welcoming, could hang out. I'd be very happy to be in their company. That's the kind of vibe and atmosphere I get. Teams like Arsenal and stuff, like, there's some likable players there, as Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka, perfectly fine with them, seem like really solid guys. But, there's just a lot of there's a lot of annoying people in there as well, instigators, as you said. And then, it's funny. It's hard to necessarily compare because you guys have run away with it to such a degree. It's like, I'm looking down the table. Newcastle are third, right? And they were never title contenders. At no point this season, maybe for more than a week, have anyone ever seriously considered Newcastle title contenders. And credit to them for being third. Having a really good season, really good manager, really decent squad. But yeah, it's kind of hard to say. But, the Chelsea squad, bunch of individuals, Man City squad, it's a transition season. But I never got the sense that Man City under Pep, I would want to hang out with either the manager or the squad. You know what I mean? I'd love to get a beer with Arne Slot. I feel like I would learn loads in about 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, I've never got that sense with the Guardiola project that I had any affinity to it, even as a slight neutral. Because, there's this kind of cold, calculated, clinical football they play that's kind of echoed, I think, in their personnel. Just doesn't really do much for me. And then you go all the way down the table, like not even joking. You see Man United, who again are 14th, right? 14th place. And you see like the opposite of your kind of squad where you've got players frozen out. You've got Rashford, who's sadly out for the season now, but he was thriving in a different environment. You've seen Anthony, say what you will, thriving in Spain. You see players who are flying high when they leave the club, and that toxicity that exists between Ineos, the fans, the players, the manager. Sounds like the manager and Rashford have this horrendous working relationship, right? From what Rashford said recently. Like, that is just a bunch of individuals who, have been bought on outrageous contracts, outrageous transfer fees, same ditto with Chelsea. And there's just there's just no real kind of cohesive team. I think what sets Liverpool apart from maybe not Arsenal, but certainly most of the teams in the who fighting for the title is like they are a whole. And I think what Slot's done is he's made everyone better. Right, you can have someone like Robertson who's maybe not having his best season, but that doesn't matter because so many other people, say McAllister, are reaching levels they haven't necessarily met before. Right, Gravenberch, he's reaching levels that I haven't seen for you guys. You get the sense that there is this real affinity between the players, the fans, and the manager, and you've kind of got the kind of ownership in the background. Yeah, it's not ideal, sure, but it's kind of in the background. Whereas Ineos, it's so front and center, it's so obnoxious. It's so impossible to hide from when, for example, as you talked about, people are being fired or he's just saying horrible things like moving season ticket holders, splitting up families who have sat together for 40 years, right? This kind of really, really just poor PR stuff. Liverpool have managed to, certainly this season, circumvent that by focusing on the football and focusing on that relationship with the fans, I think, from the outside, and having a likable squad. Not many egos, despite being the best team in the league. That feels pretty important to me.
But I think, I mean, obviously part of it is, that culture is built. I mean, I go back to Klopp days when they were not winning regularly. So it's slowly built. And obviously, as you win and start doing better, I think it gets better. I think we've all been in situations where there are certain people, we've all played on teams where there are guys where everything is going well, but there's like always a couple of guys that the moment things go south, they're going to become toxic. And I think, the key is to be able to eliminate those guys. So when things go south, instead of having that toxic environment, you have it still like a more supportive environment to get you out of that rut or like the losing streak or, whatever it is. You want to kind of get a couple of those guys out of, and I know that's what, United was trying to do perhaps with Rashford and stuff like that. I feel like, the winning thing obviously helps instill a culture, but you got to get those guys to get that started somehow and start winning and stuff like that and being supportive of each other. And that's what I see like in this team. And I'm not talking about, there are guys, like I said, where you say, like, oh God, I can't stand them, but you feel like I would like him if they were on my team. Like I would never want to root for a guy like Havertz. I just would not. Or whiny face Jesus, for example. There are so many, and I feel like Arsenal has like the most of these players somehow. I mean, the funny thing is, you talked about like being human. We were literally right before I went on air. I think it was Thursday or somebody posted a tweet from like Arsenal, like Arteta is talking to the fans. It's like something the club released, like, we need you there today and stuff. I swear it looks like poorly designed AI. Like I've seen AI commercials on Facebook stream that look more human than that dude talking to a camera and stuff. And I think that's, I don't know, it's hard to form. And we were talking about it last night. A lot of credit has to go to FSG. And I think we were wrong. We were talking about this with Gally last night. When Klopp was here, and before any rumor of him leaving or whatever, there was a huge thing of like, who gets the rebound? Is it Pep, his assistant, or is it Gerrard and stuff like that? And now, like I say, all that conversation looks really silly because I think we all said, most of us said Pep at the time. I'm just against ex-players coming back to manage the teams overall because I think it clouds judgment because you can't differentiate the player from the manager when you're like evaluating what you see out there. But I feel like now when we look back, yeah, that would not have been a great choice. You want almost a different gear guy. And I think, so who do you, we always make this pie, but I make people make pies, I should say. I'll ask you, because especially when we talk about, you talked about these players, right? And they've coming from a successful regime. It's different when you weren't having success before. You're coming from a successful regime, a guy like Klopp, and then new guy comes in, and you hear from Mo's interview that he does make tweaks, he listens to the players, he kind of like implements the stuff. But let's face it, there are a lot of, all these guys have huge egos, right? They're the best of the best of the best. They're getting paid ridiculous money. They all have egos. How much credit do you give to Slot for being able to go into that, slot into that place, if you will? Or to the guys like actually Van Dijk and Mo and all these guys who already won, been and done there, to be able to be humble enough to say, okay, let's roll with this guy, and not like constantly compare to how things were. That's not how we normally do things around here, or something like that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for me, it's like, it's kind of 40-40-20. It's 40 players, 40 manager, and 20 fans, because I feel like, Anfield remains one of the toughest places to go in the league, and it is a bit of a fortress. I'd say the same with St. James's, and I wouldn't say the same with many other places. Emirates, Etihad, sure, but I'd say those two are just clear for me in terms of atmosphere and backing. So not only did the players have to buy into the slot project, so did the fans. Yeah. And it's easy when you're winning. And, obviously there's crushing disappointment when you guys went out of the Champions League. There was frustration that you played he made one misstep, right? I'd say this season's major misstep was playing a weakened team in the FA Cup. That was just a moment of just like naivety, right? And maybe it was needed. Hey, you're battling on all fronts. I get it. But, when all said and done, I still think, nobody thought Liverpool were going to win the title this year, right? Almost nobody. Maybe some of the most optimistic fans, maybe some smart people who have watched Slot manage before, who understand the Dutch league well. So Ryan's saying 50% players, 30% Slot, 20% fans. I think that's totally fair as well. I could even agree with that, to be honest, because the players have embraced the Slot project. They've put in really consistent performances. Most of them have grown, or at least maintained their levels under him. And they've been open to working with the new managers. It's hard when somebody like Klopp, who is a larger-than-life figure, who has an ethos, that it doesn't always work. But it is a very attractive brand of football, and he has a cult of personality around him, right? You'll be talking about him for decades to come, right? Generation below me.
Exactly, yeah.
He's gonna be this figure. And under these conditions, which are by no means unfavorable, but to come in, have this like almost fully formed project, and to just really smartly steer it to be almost the best it can be without recruitment is really exceptional. So, I mean, it is a mix. And I appreciate that from Brian. I think, players are doing at least 50% of that legwork. And Serzi just mentioned that COVID season really shows, how much the Liverpool fans, well, the impact they have. And that's so true. And that's why I wanted to include them in that. For me, Liverpool is a club, unlike maybe Man City, for example, for a bit of a cheap shot, where, the fans are absolutely intrinsic to the way you guys play football. The fan base is so important. It really does impact, I feel, the way football flows, the results you guys can achieve. There really is this like dialectic two-way relationship at Liverpool. Unlike many other clubs, I would argue, in this kind of hyper-corporate soccer landscape, I would say as a club, it's really a two-way relationship in a way that not many other clubs can claim to say. So you basically, all three factions here and ownership, of course, like overseeing all of this, need to be pushing in the right direction. And this season you were. And I mean, just a shame maybe you couldn't. I think if I was a fan of Liverpool and I had one regret this season, it's that we're going to have this really exciting project that's actually taken a lot of teams by surprise. Teams were unprepared for Slot to go so well, so they underestimated you, right? I think that's fair. It's a shame it's going to be just the Premier League in a way, because for me, you're running away with the Premier League, and yet where's that trophy, right? Where's that domestic trophy, or where's that semi-final in Europe? For me, that would be the thing where I'm like, the what if. And hey, you can't win it all. And honestly, if I were you, the Premier League would be my number one. I know there's huge debate, Champions League, Premier League. For me, English fan, English football, I always care about the domestic leagues the most.
I think it's the most difficult one to win. And I think it shows a solid, successful year, not like a solid, successful run.
Yeah.
You can have a run, a solid run, and be a cup team and get through Champions League, but you can't just have like a run of like a couple of months and win a title, and especially in a top league like the Premier League. And I agree with what you're saying for like Anfield. And I think, when we go back to the COVID season, I think especially for Klopp's system, that would be kind of like an interesting experiment that I do not want to do because I don't want another COVID. But because I think this system maybe would not hurt as much from not having fans. But a system that's more designed of constant energy and rah, 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 like in your face, that needs that push from the fans really struggles when it was missing that push, like that, like an extra burst of energy that comes from the stands at Anfield for your style. Whereas this is a bit more controlled. And honestly, like if we do the 21st to fans, a huge part of it has to go to what you were saying earlier, like kind of accepting slots, which, you got to give some of that credit to Klopp, obviously introducing him and kind of like passing the torch in the best way possible. That shit does not happen regularly. Like it can't be, like, well, I don't think I've ever seen it before, leave alone, right? And but not only that, my biggest concern going into the season was how the fans, for example, a game at Anfield, let's say against Brentford, and we're expected to get 3 points, and like a team might kind of like do a low block and wait and stuff like that. I was worried that the fans would get impatient in this new system, because it's a lot more designed on patience and finding spot, moving the ball. It's more city like compared to Klopp like, and that was my biggest concern, because you see how kind of like Arsenal fans sometimes can turn on the team and kind of like create like a negative environment, like the goal goes back again, they're like, you can hear it like from the fans. I was really worried about that. So I think a huge credit to the fans in terms of not doing that. But at the same time, when you see the success rolling, it's kind of hard to be like, how come we don't do it this way? It's like, dude, we're getting 3 points. Just chill, relax, and watch. I mean, the slot special, we called it. My special is 3-1. The slot special has been like 2-0, which is not a comfortable watch by any means, but it's controlled. And if you think about it, it's a clean sheet, 2 goals, mission accomplished, and 3 points. I think the biggest thing that the fans had to do this season is kind of get adjusted to that style of how Liverpool are playing now compared to the Klopp era.
Yeah, and it's worked because you've won 6 more games than anyone else in the league, right? Would you prefer 25 2-0 wins or 19 3-1 4-1?
Yep.
You take the points. Exactly. And it's not like you play boring football. Like, I've enjoyed watching you guys. It's just been a little more methodical than perhaps the most unrestrained urges of Klopp, right? He would give us the highlights, but he could also give us not necessarily the lowlights, but there was always a certain on your edge kind of football with him, which as a neutral, yeah, it's great, but it's also nice to see a project that certainly has a sense of kind of clarity and almost sophistication in the way that you guys can defend a 1-0 or 2-0 lead in a way, yeah, it's edge of the seat, right? And you're not running away with games. But conversely, right, I kind of back you guys to hold on to that lead more than perhaps I did in the most erratic moments of the Klopp era, right?
Correct. Yes. And I think that's probably been the biggest difference of watching Liverpool this year. I mean, I worry as a lifestyle, so I'm going to be paranoid and worry like every time balls cross or a through ball comes through and stuff. But overall, the control that we've had has been huge. Ryan says the leadership was built strong through Klopp, and that's a huge thing. And I think, and he's mentioned that a lot, that he has not had to worry about discipline, whereas that's what most managers worry about. I was talking about this last night. I think a lot of the credit has to go on the players, that when, even if it was Klopp that was, instilling that discipline through, guys like Henderson and Milner and stuff like that, like top professionals, where they set the example and hold everybody accountable and stuff. I think, Van Dijk as a captain has grown a lot. I think, I don't know, because like the Dutch connection, or he realized that he has to be the one to kind of lead more now, as opposed to, it's kind of hard to grab that leadership role from Henderson, especially when you have a guy like Klopp already still there. I think it felt like maybe he had to step up to that leadership role, but it takes that leadership to keep those standards and not let him drop because there's a new boss and stuff like that. So I give a lot of the credit to those players and guys like, Van Dijk and Robertson and Mo. And that's why I'm really, really, really happy they signed those 2 guys, because I think what they bring day in and day out, you can't replace. I mean, you put those 2 guys on a team like Spurs or United and stuff. And I'm not just talking because, you just put the best center back and the best winger in the league over there. I think it would change the club.
Or it would break them. Or it would completely break them. It would retire them.
Or yeah, they would go to jail probably. I can only see, because especially in the case of Mo, it's a guy more leading by example. You know, he's in the gym all the time, and if he takes
Oh
care
yeah.
of himself that well at that age and like, you know, so professional, it's a lot easier for a guy like Elliott's and Curtis Jones and those guys to follow. I mean, Slot talks a lot about how, you know, Van Dijk is part of the success behind Gravenberg in terms of mindset, morale, and stuff. We look past these things. We treat it like FIFA. They're like, oh, the guy's getting so much money and he has skills. You plug him in there, he plays. But there's so much going on behind the scenes in terms of like mentality and morale and stuff like that. Those leaders are huge, man. And I think this team is like freaking full of them. I don't think Liverpool fans realize. I mean, so many damn national team captains in one squad. But that's not a coincidence, probably, Glenn.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of guys this club goes after, which brings us back to why I was saying they're good humans, because they're in those roles for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. They all do it on the international stage, you know, week in, week out. They're kind of MVPs for their nation, and they're leaders for their nation as well, as you said, you know, captains. I mean, yeah, your recruitment's been great because you have the kind of caliber of player, the kind of mentality monsters, aren't they? Like, that's how you'd probably describe this team. They know the standard. And like, how many times this season has the first team fallen below the standards you'd expect? Not many at all. Yeah, so I think that really epitomizes like the kind of caliber of player that you're bringing in. It's people who are used to leadership, but they also have the kind of humility to say, okay, I'm a leader for maybe for my nation. But that doesn't mean I'm the captain of Liverpool. It means I listen to Van Dijk or whoever else, right? So there's still a hierarchy, a good positive hierarchy where you know the guys you're going to trust to get it done. And what you want is them motivating the people kind of just below them. And I think you guys have a good balance of that. Yeah, it's really impressive.
Still, they have the title, though, right? I mean, you think about it, like, you know, in the work environments, like if you're in charge of people, and there are a lot of guys who have been there, done that, and already responsible, it makes your job as a manager easier because you don't have to worry about these guys as much. They already have self-discipline, so it's almost easier to focus on the guys that need your support, whether it's kicking the butts or lead by example or dragging them or whatever it takes. It's I feel like, you know, Van Dijk probably doesn't have to get on Robertson's or Mo's case to be a professional, but maybe he did with Gravenberg or Soboslai. Not fact, Soboslai is a national team captain too. But I think in some ways it makes it easier to have so many people who are probably not being led, if you will, but just following along. Because flip side of that is, if you're a captain under another captain, you know the challenges of being a captain.
Yeah.
They're gonna make it easy on the guy and be like, I'm not gonna be the problem guy that I hate dealing with for this guy who is my captain now.
Absolutely. And just as a quick point of contrast, I've just got the team sheets up from the weekend. Compare your kind of like, you know, embarrassment of riches in terms of leadership, mentality, etc. Looking at Spurs' team, like, sure, there's probably some injuries as usual with Spurs, whatever. I look at that 11 and I'm not seeing off the top of my head a single person I would entrust with the armband. I mean, maybe Vicario, I guess, but like he's been a bit erratic this season too, right? He's a good keeper, but like I think he has a mistake in him more frequently you want. You look at the rest of that team, the other 10 players. I'm sure it's youth there, etc., etc. Archie Gray will captain the team sooner or later. A great talent, but there's no leaders there. I'm not seeing anyone to take the game by the scruff of its neck and to like push the team on. Similar to Brentford in terms of Liverpool, it's like we have an 11 that has take your pick of people like Christian Norgard, Nathan Collins, Ethan Pinnock, even though he's fallen out of favour slightly at the minute. You know, I'd give the armband to Wissa. I'd give it to Mbumo. I'd give it to like 6 players. You know, Jensen's been injured this season. He's a senior pro in the team. You know, you could give that armband to like 8 or 9 players and they'd do the job. And it's the same with Liverpool. You see a team like Spurs, it's like, well, I'm not going to give it to Solanke or Johnson or Tell or Madison or Bergvall or Gray. It's the entire 11. I wouldn't give the armband to any of them because they're either inexperienced or just like had a really poor season. So yeah, it's a real privilege, I guess, as a club for you to have such a good squad to pick from, and it's delivered. So let's see if you can do it again next season. That's where you're at.
That's going to be the challenge. And I know, like, you know, Abdul Rohim and stuff in the comments are saying too, like, it's a big challenge to kind of, you know, continue it. And, you know, like, Slot was not downplaying it, but I really do feel like having not spent last season, I feel like, you can spend, you have some assets that you can move to generate even more funds to spend. And I trust in the process of like Edwards and, Hughes and stuff like that. Like if they get a guy, I think that's like the faith that, you should have as a Liverpool fan. If you don't, I don't know, you have really serious trust issues. But, like if they sign a guy for 18 million or something from the Portuguese league or, like Eredivisie or somewhere like that, I'm going to have faith that they know what they're doing. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, why do we get, he's not good enough for Liverpool and stuff. These guys know what they're doing. I'm going to have faith in them getting the right guys in terms of slots, like basically identifying maybe what he wants. And then, the powers that be, Edwards, Hughes, I know within a certain budget and value, I think more than budget, it's always been value. They've spent the money, despite what everybody says. You look at these wages and stuff like that. They have spent the money where they have felt it was the right one. I mean, they offered over 100 for Caicedo last year. And I mean, look at Van Dijk. Look at when they got Ali. And I know that money came from Coutinho and stuff. When they identified somebody that they felt like they can take them to the next level, they've spent it. So let's see what they do in the offseason. I'm kind of like I normally hate the transfer season because the rumors are out of control, but I'm kind of looking forward to this one to see how they improve on what we have. Because I do really think this is just the beginning for the squad, as young as they are. And the key thing was keeping Mo and Van Dijk, the two huge pillars, like one in the top, one in the back. And now you just got to build on it. But this is the one I was like actually just putting on the screen over here. Let me see if I can zoom it in so it makes a bit more sense. But in terms of like the predictions, I mean, it's just Arsenal and City in there. Some people don't even have Liverpool. Most of them have the third. You can kind of like see that they have him as like the third and stuff, but not. I mean, some of them don't have him in the top four. More funnily is a lot of people thought Tottenham would be fourth or United would be third or fourth and stuff like that.
West Ham fourth is my favorite.
Yeah.
What were they up to when they were planning that list?
That's
fourth bottom. They're fourth from bottom. Perfect. They just reversed it. It's literally where they are.
Close, but the other way around. But let's take a look at this over here, because your boys are going to come. Obviously, you guys gonna let me roll this around over here to kind of like show how close you guys are in to being in the mix for Europe. We were kind of like talking about this right before we went on air. So you guys are going to play Forest, right? But a win over there would put you guys right in the European bracket. I guess let me ask you this though. If it is not Europa, do you even care or do you even want it as a Brentford fan to be in whatever it's called, Conference Cup or whatever Chelsea is?
I mean, for me, having seen us in League Two, is it better than Southend, or Grimsby, or Accrington? If your answer is yes, and I've watched us get relegated nearly every weekend from League One to League Two, I've watched us be basically in the relegation zone in League Two. Not that long ago, 15 years ago, say, pretty much. If you've kind of suffered through that dross for many, many years, if you're offering us a ticket, if it's a plane or a boat or a bus to anywhere else outside of England or Scotland or Wales, we will take it. We will be the first on that transportation, and we will be delighted to support Brentford anywhere that's not a kind of 7,000 capacity shed that I've watched us play in. So yes, and it would be a huge privilege, and we would never ever take that for granted. Or
you wouldn't worry about I guess the reason I ask is not because you would be like too cool for school, but would you worry that, man, this is gonna it's not that big of a deal and it will take us away from
it is a big deal
in the Premier League?
Nah, it is a big deal. It is a big deal. I mean, look at what it meant to West Ham. And look where they've gone now. I mean, it's a pathetic season from them. Potter's been embarrassing, to be honest. Both of the managers have been shamefully bad. It's not the worst squad. It's not the best, but it's not the worst squad. And they should be mid-table. You look at what it meant to the fans. That's like their best memory in however many decades. I don't know when their previous trophy was before that. But would maybe winning a domestic cup you know, be on par with it. That would be maybe a better conversation. Would we like to maybe get to the final of / win maybe the League Cup, or go all the way in a kind of Europa Conference League that's like a third tier? That's probably a better talking point.
Which one would you take?
That's a really, really hard conversation. I think I would still pick Europe because it would be so exciting and there'd just be so much more diversity. It's like, how excited could you be? Very, very excited, with the caveat. Look at Newcastle. But would I prefer to beat the Liverpool reserves, maybe, right, and kind of get a 1-0 against Brighton, a 2-1 against Bournemouth, and kind of scrape our way there and maybe beat Newcastle in the final? Or would we like to jet across the entire continent, go to a load of great places, play in Spain, you know, the Netherlands, you know, further afield as well, go to Eastern Europe and get some games in Poland or wherever? That's way more exciting. And that's like a narrative and a story and like a diversity that you're just not going to get playing domestically. Now, yeah, but regardless, winning a domestic cup, even the League Cup, would be the greatest moment, arguably in our history, since probably World War II. So, you know, they're probably on par for me, but it's hard.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I can see like why Europe would be a lot more appealing because, I mean, you know, like we're spoiled, right? Like, you know, people complain, like people would bitch and moan if we were in the Conference League, you know, like it's the Champions League. Europe almost feels like I guess kind of a thing. So we're kind of spoiled in going to Europe, whereas, you know, going to Europe, getting that opportunity and then winning it would be huge, because you got to figure the League Cup opportunity is always there, or the FA Cup opportunity is always there, as opposed to, you know, like doing the European run and getting a big one there. Well, I guess let's kind of like finish up with that, because you mentioned it earlier that it is the biggest race that's ongoing right now. Has your predictions for who will be in the top 5 changed from what you've seen this past weekend?
Oh, good question. Should we run down it? So what have we got? So we've obviously got you and Arsenal. Top 2, clear, good to go for the Champions League. Obviously you, and then Arsenal pretty comfortably. So what are we looking at here? All, apart from Forest, all on 34 games. So Forest.
A scenario, by the way, I didn't mean to cut you off, where if Newcastle has a good run, or City, Arsenal now finishing second. And I don't even know if they would care, but with the Champions League happening this weekend, so they might rest people knowing they only lost 1-0 and they got to go to France next week. And then they play us coming from the Champions League. So if they lose to Liverpool, and I don't even know, you know, we've kind of like talking about this over the last 2 days. We don't know how Liverpool will approach the rest of the season. Will it be a rotation like Abdul Rahim was saying earlier, or will we go full force rest of the way? But I can see a scenario where they lose points, and would it even matter? There's no difference between maybe a couple of, for like £100,000 or something like that. There's really no difference between being second or third, really. But
no, I agree. And can we just take a quick look at, I've just got it on my screen, the Newcastle results recently. They don't do boring games at the minute, right?
No.
They beat Leicester 3. I didn't realize this. I clicked on it. It's the only reason I'm excited to share it. They beat Leicester 3-0, United 4-1. I forgot about that game. Palace 5-0. Then they bizarrely ran out of energy and just like their health bar just went to 0, and they got battered by Villa 4-1. And then they replenished their health, and like some championship, you know, third-rate side Ipswich come there, get a player sent off again, and then get battered 3-0. So anyway, regardless, they don't do boring games, but I agree. I mean, if you look at, they've got Anthony Gordon coming back from a kind of suspension, then injury. I would struggle to find a more exciting front line at the minute than a rotation of Murphy, who's in incredible form, credit to him, Harvey Barnes in incredible form. This is a form lineup, what I'm saying. Isak, best striker in the league, after Haaland, who's injured right now. And then you bring in Anthony Gordon, who I know is a Marmite player, and he probably sums up a player you want on your team, not against you. He's probably one of them. But like, hey, that's a front four that can be firing. And Harvey Barnes has been exceptional the last couple of games. So yeah, anyway.
They play Arsenal too, by the way. So if they beat
really,
so these are their remaining games right here at Brighton. I mean, that Chelsea game is huge for both of them. And you were talking about it earlier. St. James Park is a huge advantage there. But they do play Arsenal, and then they finish the season with Everton at home. So
Interesting.
That's a 6-pointer right there.
That's a good game, isn't it? That was great to know that, because that's going to be one of those games that really will kind of, hey, I mean, maybe they'll both be going to get second and third by about then, but that's a game that could maybe help decide second place. I agree with you. And then, yeah, to go, back to the table below that, it's hard to say. I mean, if Forest beat us Thursday, which I hope they don't, but they could obviously do, they would, if I'm right in reading this, they would leapfrog Newcastle and go third. Which I didn't know. So how interesting is that? It's just that it's so tightly bunched below Arsenal at the minute, including them now, really. So if we're going to look at a top, man, it's hard to say, isn't it? I feel like Chelsea are kind of running out of steam. And if there's one team in the last 2 years that's been carried by one player, it's probably Chelsea and Cole Palmer, I would argue.
Yes.
Certainly last season. So he is not firing. They're in trouble. I think Maresca's probably in trouble. We've talked about that before on the show. City just have the quality, don't they? They have the quality. City are going to be top 4. Maybe so. Can we be bored? Or is it going to be boring to say Liverpool, Arsenal, Newcastle, City? Is that a cop-out? Hey, I'll say that. I'll say Brentford get a good result of Forest tomorrow and keep this current top 4. I can see Forest finishing above Chelsea. I think Chelsea aren't going to be top 4. That's where I'm leaning.
So out of those, so you're saying Chelsea will be the one to drop off and Forest will replace them then?
I can see that. See that.
That's fair.
But Forest are probably very, very deflated after the FA Cup. So are they going to bounce back, or are they going to be feeling really heavy that they kind of went to Wembley, didn't put in their best performance? They played fine, but, the quality difference between them and City was for the big occasion, right? Big players, big occasions. City played the game. Forest were unlucky, but played the occasion a little bit more. So I'm going to be boring and say top 4 as it stands. We could see Newcastle, let's be less boring and say Newcastle to overtake Arsenal and finish second. Can we say that? Does that give it a little bit more interest?
Fair. I'll go with that. I'll roll with that. Interest? I think I agree that Chelsea is the one that I look at those teams to get results, and Chelsea is the one that I am not convinced about, because here again, when you look at the schedules, and I know, the Conference League, like I say, they're kind of like playing mostly like a rotation and stuff like that. But they do have Liverpool next. They go away to Chelsea. Then they have United, and then they go away to Forest to finish the season. So that by far, they have the toughest.
Awful. It's awful, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm a Chelsea fan, I'm looking at that and saying, yikes. Because it is not an easy way to finish off the season. The Liverpool thing, like I say, I just don't know how it's like Liverpool is going to play this rest of the season. That would be kind of like interesting to see. But and I'm torn on it myself. I mean, we were talking about it yesterday. I'm kind of like torn on it myself. So let's do this should be easy, and we're not going to fight over it, I would think. But let's do Anali's picks, where we pick the upsets to raise some funds for those in need, like us. So let's look at the games over here. Let's share this here. Okay, here are the games for. I'm not going to include your guys. Let's look at match day 35.
Yeah.
What do you have as your upsets over here?
Just because I saw them one just postscript on our conversation, I can see Villa finishing above Chelsea too. Now, I know Rashford's out, but I can see Villa leapfrogging Chelsea. So I can see Chelsea running out of steam. And I'm really glad you pulled up their fixtures, because I didn't know it was such a hard run in. So just saw Villa on there. Let's see. Oh, wow. Imagine an upset between Leicester City and Southampton. Would that like the game being called off or something? Would that be more entertaining? I don't know what would be an upset there. Both teams scoring and entertaining their fans. Would that be an upset?
Get the goal in the early and then lose to Leicester.
They'll lose.
Happen, I think.
It would be an own goal. It wouldn't be a Leicester City. It would be a Southampton own goal in the last minute. Good God. I mean, we really are spoilt for horrible matches with Leicester, Southampton, and Everton, Ipswich. I mean, a form of cruelty would be sitting a fan in front of 2 screens and forcing them to watch that at 9 o'clock for me on Saturday. And that's just awful. It's awful.
Who's the poor soul waking up for that?
Oh, can you imagine? Dual screen, one on each. You maybe get 1 goal across 180 minutes.
All right, start going this way, and I think that's because I think we are all expecting some kind of rotation. Knowing today's results.
Yes. So it is true. There is one that jumps out, says he's already snapped it up, which is Bournemouth Arsenal. Bournemouth have run out of steam, so let's say that. They've really fallen off a bit of a cliff. But it's going to be what Arsenal are going to pull out the under-15s.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, their young winger will be a senior player with the squad they roll out against Bournemouth. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough because that's what kind of upset is that this full-strength Bournemouth team should beat a second-string Arsenal team. Let's see. Says he also mentioned West Ham Tottenham. I mean, good luck predicting that game. I mean, he said West Ham.
I don't even know what's an upset over there.
I don't know.
Like, is Tottenham favorites to make West Ham an upset? I would favor West Ham at home. Having seen Tottenham and how horrific they are, and again, they're going to be sandwiched between two Europa games, even though they have the easier brackets. They're going to play on Thursday. So a Sunday morning game, I don't think they're kind of putting a lot of starters out there. I think that's going to be a lot of rotation there. I mean, the interesting one is City Wolves. I don't know if that Wolves can pull something off.
I like that. I like that. We could have a really masochistic weekend and dual screen Leicester City, Southampton, and Everton Ipswich, and then wake up for me 8 a.m. on Sunday to watch West Ham Spurs. I mean, that would be a real feast of football, wouldn't it? You get to watch like the entire bottom six back to back over the weekend. I mean, seriously, real rough bunch of games.
Open your eyes.
Oh, what a disaster. Ryan's nap, the one I was going to do. Shout out to Ryan. I like Palace Forest. You get a nice kind of reflection of the FA Cup there. You get the FA Cup heroes and you get the FA Cup disappointment. And I can see Mateta, Eze, Sarr. I mean, they don't do it when they're in my fantasy team, but they seem to do it when they're playing in the FA Cup semi-final. I mean, I've had them for weeks, and I can see them putting a few goals past Forest. Forest's defensive date has fallen off since a few injuries. They've gone from being rock solid, top 3 in the league, to all the way down to bottom 6 defensively last couple of games. So Ryan, I love the Palace pick. That's where I'd go. And the rest are much for muchness. I mean, you know, I love the Wolves City pick as well. I think we're pretty much.
That'll be interesting, and I don't even know if they would get something out of it. But that was one thing that I would watch for. And I mean, Vitor, when he was a Fenerbahce manager, I thought he got kind of like a raw deal. I thought he was given a couple more years, we could have had this guy as a manager, because I think he's really good stuff. And I would watch for Wolves in the off season as well, because that's one of Vitor's strengths, I think, is to find guys that he can get and convert into, like, I know he's been injured all year, but I keep talking about Ferdi Kadıoğlu, who's at Brighton now. Arda Güler, initially he did not get as many opportunities, but he got pulled from the youth team to, you know, kind of practice with the big boys while Vitor was there as well. But he's created a lot of, Kim, who's at Bayern right now as the center back and stuff, all guys that Vitor brought up. I remember when Fenerbahce got Kim from like South Korea, everybody was like, "Who the hell is this guy? He's not good enough for Fenerbahce," and stuff like that. And then I think we turned around and sold him for like 15 or 30 or something like to Napoli. Wow. Who turned around and sold him to Bayern for like 50 or something like that. So I mean, I think Fenerbahce bought him at the time for like $1 million or $3 million or something like that, because incredible, he was like from South Korea, so who knows about the South Korean league. But that would be an interesting offseason, I think, to watch for Wolves. I will go with Bournemouth, though. If I'm putting money on it, I will go with Bournemouth. I think they get something out of there. They have people to hurt you with. And I agree with what you're saying. Form-wise, it's not the Bournemouth when we went away to them and it was a huge win for Liverpool and stuff like that, like a month, maybe 2 months ago, that, you know, when we were talking about they have a good chance of being top 5. I remember talking on the panel show about it. That team is kind of gone. I think once at the end of the tunnel, there was like top 5. And then once that kind of got dark and they couldn't see anything, it just feels like a team that kind of gave up a little bit on making that run.
I think they've won once in the Premier League in weeks and weeks. I mean, they've had a really barren spell. And that Højlund equaliser was such a kick in the guts, wasn't it, for that United team to get a late equaliser. You're on for a clean sheet. You're on for a huge home win. But I agree with you to be positive about them. Think about Arsenal, heavy rotation, players like Semenyo, one of the most exciting players in the league, who I think could do a job for Liverpool with a little bit more experience. I can see him in the Liverpool setup. I really can. I've watched him in Bristol City for many years.
I'm really big on rating Bournemouth. Like,
Oh
just
yeah,
make him Southampton. Make him the Southampton with 2025, and just come back with like Kirkes, Huijsen, Semenyo, and I mean, they
all
just
these
like,
players.
Just go spend the money there, save yourself the travel, use your miles to Bournemouth.
Yeah, they're proven in the Premier League, and they even players like Alex Scott, who's a genius player, just has injury issues. But just think like Semenyo, Kluivert, Evan Nelson might be suspended, so they might have to change things around up front. But they've got players, as you said, who can hurt you. And if Arsenal, they're going to have a hangover, right? Crushing result for them today, in the kind of emotional sense. They weren't by any means completely outplayed or destroyed. They just,
by the way, dude, like,
where did they let us win?
Away. Yeah. Like, we beat them away. They beat Forest 5-0. That was probably like their peak, right?
Then they went to the beach. Then they all got
at home. That they beat like Everton in the cup, but then they beat Southampton, which I'm sure we can put together a team over here and beat Southampton. They lose to Wolves at home. They lose to Brighton away. They beat Wolves in penalties, but they tied Tottenham away, which is kind of like a loss.
It keeps going.
They lose to you guys at home 2-1. They lose to City in the cup 2-1. They lost to Ipswich at home 2-1. They tied West Ham away. They beat Fulham and poor Alex. And then they tied Crystal Palace away, and now United away. That is a horrific run of form.
Really, really bad run. And they weren't playing, with respect, the greatest team, with Brentford included, the greatest set of teams you'll ever see in the Premier League there. So, we'll see. We'll see, question marks. But, it's a game I probably wouldn't sit and watch, because of the rotation for Arsenal. But it's certainly a fixture score-wise I would keep an eye out, because I'd be really curious to see if Bournemouth can pull it together. They got a great squad. It's a great manager.
Like, I don't see a lot of games that I would sit down and chill and watch.
It's a horrible weekend for games. Really, it's grueling, isn't it? It's absolutely, it's like absolutely brutal. And then this is the thing, like even the marquee games don't have the same kind of big vibes that they would have 2 weeks ago. This is the thing. It's a shame that you guys have run away with it for a neutral, and the bottom three are so horrific, because we should still have more competitive games. Arsenal should be fighting for the title and playing their best team back to back to back, 3 times in a row. They shouldn't, So it is what it is.
If it is a title race, Bournemouth at Arsenal, and then Liverpool going to Chelsea and stuff, is probably a huge weekend in a title race. Now it's kind of like it's like nothing to watch.
Imagine United going to Brentford needing a win for Champions League instead of needing a win to get to 15th place. That would be quite nice, wouldn't it? That would be really cool for them.
But I hate to say it, I enjoy it better this time. The hell with the neutrals. This is definitely a lot more fun. But that'll be it for us this week. Next week we'll probably be back to the full panel work, all these scheduling conflicts and stuff like that. And really, this thing is coming to an end over there. So it'll be interesting to see what everybody's hoping for or planning for the summer. But Glenn, thanks a lot as always, man. Thanks so much for joining us in the audience. Give us a like, thumbs up, all that kind of good stuff. And same time, same place. We'll see you guys next week. Take care.